You guys are good to go whenever you're ready.
E hoana uluna e pi'i ano lalo e hui ana na moku e ku ana ka paia. E hoana uluna e pi'i ana lalo e hui ana na moku e ku ana ka paia. E hoana uluna e pi'i ana lalo e hui ana na moku e ku ana ka paia. Ola. Aloha nui kako, everyone. Mahalo for joining us today for our session. Forgot what the name of the session was. One moment, stand by. Cultural approaches to reducing harm across Moanānuiakea. I started with this oli as it brings in a lot of really special togetherness for the resource that we're about to share with you. It actually contains the name of the resource, Aihuiana na moku, which is a cultural resource that we created for communities that are looking for cultural healing. So this is the name of our toolkit that we're going to be sharing with you here today. Ihuiana na moku is the name. We're going to actually drop it in the chat for you folks to be able to access and download your own digital version of the toolkit for you to keep. It's about 70 plus pages, so I would say definitely download it. It's a lot easier to access and utilize, and you can even print it out if that's something you want to do. So participants here in our session today, we're going to review the resource Ihuiana na moku, which again is our harm reduction toolkit. It's really about cultural healing. And we're going to talk a little bit about what a template for weaving cultural practices could look like throughout the Pacific, especially when we're looking at harm reduction in terms of reducing harms in our communities that's been caused by historical, cultural, intergenerational traumas. We'll also identify strengths, protections, and resiliency within our own, our vast, in all the different cultures that make up all of our ohana in the Pacific. We'll look at all the different strengths and protective and resiliency factors that are contained within all of our cultures and how they embody social, emotional, mental, and physical health and healing. We also hope that we will get some input from you folks who are seeing this presentation today in hopes that you would want to weave your own cultural practices into a template for your culture. So I'm going to go through this, and please feel free to reach out to us if you would like to be a part of this project moving forward as we look at what this could look like throughout the Pacific. So a little bit about us just briefly. There are three of us presenting today. Aubrey Yanger Mariano, who works for Papua Lōkahi. We will all go into more detail about ourselves in our presentation section. So just a brief overview. Carol Ann Carl, who is a research coordinator with Mapuna Lab, and myself, who also works with Papua Lōkahi on our substance use and mental health projects. And then I also work on Papua Lōkahi's initiative along with other partner organizations for the AA, the Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Ohana Center of Excellence for Behavioral Health. So a little background on Papua Lōkahi. We're the Native Hawaiian Health Board. We oversee the 5 Native Hawaiian healthcare systems, which are each located on throughout the Hawaiian Islands. We also house the Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship Program in order to increase Kanaka Maoli or Native Hawaiians in our health workforce. I also serve as the project manager again for the Asian American Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander Ohana Center of Excellence. This is an initiative of Papua Lōkahi, along with the Hawaii Department of Health, Adult Mental Health Division, and San Jose State University and Cal State East Bay. So we create a space, an online space to help support folks that are looking for mental health or other behavioral health resources that want to really find something that's more culturally responsive. As you hear from our speakers this morning, there are a lot of, folks are not getting the help that they need really. And so what our kuleana or our responsibility is to make sure that there are more cultural approaches, more culturally responsive care, more teams that are providing care that are familiar with worldviews and understandings and history of all of our people of the Pacific. So that's what we do. We have resource directories. We have lots of learning opportunities online. We also offer in-language learning opportunities. We have a training and technical assistance department that folks can fill out a request for, so we can provide culturally tailored care for specific regions. Our service areas throughout the continental US, Hawaii and Alaska, as well as our US affiliate Pacific Island, Ohana. We have regional steering committees for each of these regions, which we are still recruiting for if anyone is interested. We also have a national steering committee that will guide all the work. Soon we will have many more downloadable resources, community toolkits, community discussion areas, and an ongoing newsletter that will provide all of this information on a regular basis to folks. So please check out our website, sign up for our listserv and some of our trainings. And let me know if you have any questions. So here's the resource that we're going to be talking about today, Wianana Moku, and you can see it's about 70+ pages. It has a lot of different sections. It talks, we actually anchored the beginning of this in a little bit of backstory. So we talk about, we have these different sections that really preface how to utilize the toolkit, anchoring it in culture right out of the gate, and then bringing in a little more information to increase awareness and provide a cultural lens on some of the substance use and behavioral health issues that we're seeing. So before I get into that nitty-gritty of that, I want to introduce myself a little bit more. O Lōkahi kaua ko inoa o no hilo no pi'ihonua makamokuakea mayau o Moanānuiakea ku mauna o wailuku ku uwai ea ku maukumu loa'a keole ka halawa ola. So aloha, again, my name is Lōkahi kaua. I am from Hilo on Hawaii Island and the Ahupua of Pi'ihonua. I bring into the space with me today Moanānuiakea, Moanānuiakea, my mountain source, and the Wailuku River, my water source, which you'll see pictured here up top and on the far right. Those are the sources that keep me anchored in my home, and they keep me anchored no matter where I am, even if I'm far from home. Those are the things that always keep me grounded in knowing who I am and where I am from. A little bit more about this resource and how it kind of relates to me. This resource was originally an ask from our Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction. And for me, it was kind of a lot more tied to my own personal experience. Part of my introduction that I brought in, Loa'a keole ka halawa ola, refers to an olelo no'eau, or a Hawaiian proverb that talks about a goddess, Iaka, and her journey. That she took, this is a mythological story that's been passed down for generations. The journey that she took is one of self-discovery, of learning who she was, learning what her strengths are, learning about what she could do for others as well. She learned about her gifts with words. She learned about her healing powers. And at one point, she was actually able to bring folks back to life. And so that olelo no'eau refers to that time when she brought life back into Lohi'au, which was the lover of Pele that she was actually sent to fetch along this journey. And so for me, as someone who has lived experience with substance abuse, mental health, as well as being justice involved, my healing journey very heavily is rooted in cultural reconnection. When I was early on in my healing journey, I came home to Hawaii. A lot of the time that I was in heavy use and experiencing a lot of those behavioral health issues, I was stuck, let's say, on the continent. So very disconnected from culture, very isolated during that time. When I returned home, it was a journey, again, of self-discovery, of learning who I was, who my family was, really tracing that back. But in the beginning, it was really hard for me. it was hard because I felt out of place. I didn't necessarily grow up in Hawaii. I felt like I was continuously on the outside of learning culture and not ever really let to be fully in on the inside. And so that was hurtful for me. You know, a lot of the people along the way had, you know, tried to give me advice, which I think they thought was advice at the time. But for me, it didn't make any sense. They kept telling me things like, learn your mo'oku auhau, which is your genealogy. And at that time in my life, very early on in my healing, I didn't understand why that was important. I thought, I don't know these people, you know, none of my family have necessarily ever taken an interest in me. So why would I need to do my mo'oku auhau? Like, this is me, I'm putting my life together. But it wasn't until I actually took the journey to learn my mo'oku auhau and put those pieces together. Am I getting emotional? When I finally started to put those pieces together was when that journey started to open up for me. And even still yet along that journey, there was still challenges of access or being allowed to access the knowledge or being, you know, feelings of not being enough as well, which I'm sure a lot of other folks can resonate with too. And so when we were asked to do this resource, I really thought about my own journey. And for thinking about harm reduction, what does that actually look like? And for me, harm reduction is connecting to culture. That is what keeps us healthy. That is what keeps us grounded. But for so many that don't have those cultural connections, don't have kupuna, right? I didn't have kupuna in my family, or I have kupuna now, but I didn't then. And, you know, you can't just go pick one up, right? So, you know, so what could that possibly look like? And so we wanted to create something that, while it didn't give away all the secrets of our culture, as we know, you know, that's not something we're gonna do, but we do want to create more avenues to connect folks with that cultural connection. Where can they go to learn more? Where can they go that they can start to invest in that if they want to commit to long-term learning of a practice, or studying with a kumu, or sitting with a kupuna, right? Kumu is the teacher, a kupuna is an elder. If they want to do those things, you know, how can we create more low barrier avenues for them to travel to be able to do so, and really be able to expand our understanding of what harm reduction could be. So that's what we did. So I'm gonna dig into that too. So before I dig into it, the framework for understanding Native Hawaiian worldview is important. And I believe my other presenters are gonna share from their cultural perspectives as well. This is something that's crucial, right? Especially for those that have been disconnected and may not understand this understanding of a worldview, but it is deep inside. And I bet that once they start to learn it, they will start to understand. It's an innate concept. So our perspective of the world is rooted in our reciprocal relationships between people, spirituality, and land. And you'll see it depicted here in the triangle to show that this is a balanced kind of a relationship. So the aina gives to our spirituality, the aina gives to kanaka, or people, but people also give back to aina, right? People also give back to spirituality. It has to work both ways, and it has to be an equal relationship. And that's what creates Mauli'ola, or our optimal health. But with Western influence and colonization, it really created this imbalance within this paradigm. It created severings within these sides, right? And we see that with cultural, historical, intergenerational trauma. We see that with huge issues that we're dealing with today, like the wildfires, right? There's been a severing of a connection with land, right? Or there's been a severing of our connection with our spirituality. And that creates an imbalance, which creates an imbalance in our overall health. So as we started to build this, this resource, we were guided by our Cultures and Addictions Advisory Council, which features folks from each island in Hawaii, folks that live in that intersection of culture and addiction. We took a tour around Hawaii as well, doing community listening sessions to look at strengths, concerns, places of healing that are already existing, as well as any workforce development needs. We focused in on what substance use in Native Hawaiian communities looks like, and what cultural healing needs to look like, feel like, and sound like. And what we found when we talked about harm reduction is that's a really hard concept for communities to connect to. But if we think about it, at its core, it is a native concept, right? Meeting people where they're at, being judgment free, approaching things, you know, completely empty of any kind of judgment. These things are aspects of our culture already. So when we shifted that perspective away from this Western term of harm reduction, and we centered ourselves in our cultural understandings of how we know to interact with one another and the world around us, it started to click for folks. When we started to think about harm reduction as things we're already doing in our communities, we're teaching our keiki, our kids, to ku'ikalo or pound kalo, right? This is a harm reduction strategy. They're family strengthening, right? These types of cultural practices are in essence harm reduction, and we're already doing this. So harm reduction in Hawaii then includes our attitudes, actions, and understanding of kanaka, ohana, and community members and healthcare service providers. It also acknowledges the harmful impacts of colonization, while creating space for healing conversations, culture, and connections. It's a process to elevate Hawaiian ways of knowing and being, which are strongly connected to holism, spirituality, and our relationships to Aina. So again, we're looking at harm reduction. We're addressing what has been severed by colonization. If we look at harm reduction as reducing the harms of colonization, and we know our worldview is rooted in these reciprocal relationships, we're amending those relationships and creating that balance again. I'm actually going to skip that because I know I need to get to my co-presenters here. So why we started to do this is we started to see a disproportionate impact among our communities. Fentanyl is hitting our streets hard. Our kids were dying, or they are still dying. On Hawaii Island alone, every 11 days, someone dies of an overdose. It's really hitting hard right now, and it's hitting our kids especially. And so we wanted to be able to bring more awareness, but a lot of communities weren't necessarily ready to just, go in with just the drug awareness stuff. So we needed to really think about what is it, right? What is it that we're actually addressing here? So we know the way that we approach substance use and mental health and things like that are that they're symptoms of a much deeper trauma. So when we're working in our addressing of that, we're looking at the deeper source. We're looking at that cultural, historical, intergenerational, or even lifetime trauma that's impacting, that's creating layers of eha that are keiki then are being grown from, right? So these layers of our intergenerational traumas, the different traumas that are passed down are in essence the soil that our next generation begins to come out of. So that's what we're addressing. We're looking at making healthier soil for our kids to come up out of. So when you download this resource guide, we want you to take a look at culture, right? Right out of the gate, we're talking about culture. We want to be rooted in our life ways and how we have been taught to learn to interact with one another and the world around us. We have several different frameworks, Aloha Response, Kukulu Kumohana. Actually, I have them on subsequent slides that I'll show you in just a second. So we have these frameworks that can help someone kind of maintain balance. That we have frameworks in there that can help someone look at their own personal well-being if there's someone who uses substances, or we have frameworks that can help someone who is in an allyship position, someone who wants to walk alongside their loved one who is struggling with substance use. And I want to also mention that the framing for Indigenous harm reduction as reducing harms caused by colonization comes to us from the First Nations Health Authority, who have been doing really instrumental work in harm reduction, and were kind enough to allow us to use that framing as we develop this resource for our people. So again, harm reduction in Hawaii, we looked at ma'i, right, which is sickness in Hawaii. We looked at the difference between how sickness was viewed in ancient times versus how sickness is viewed today. And then how that sickness is addressed, because substance use is not something that existed in ancient times. It is something that's been introduced by Western culture, but that doesn't mean that usually it's, a Hawaiian sickness would be treated with a Hawaiian way. A Western sickness would be treated in a Western way. But with substance use, it actually impacts both things, right? So because it creates the severing of these relationships, but it also creates, but it's also a Western introduction thing. So we have to actually approach it in two different ways. It's approach it in addressing the substance use, but we have to address the underlying trauma or the underlying severing of those cultural connections, or that which keeps someone in their optimal health space. The Aloha response is one of the frameworks in this resource. It talks about allyship. It provides this is a framework that was taught by Auntie Pilahi Paki through Uncle Pono Shim. And we were able to get permission from Uncle Pono Shim to really take a lens to this and look at the Aloha response and how that would look like through allyship. When we respond to someone with Aloha, Auntie Pilahi Paki tells us that the Aloha response is a coordination of mind and heart within each person, and it brings each person to the self. Each person must think and emote good feelings to others in the contemplation and presence of life force, Aloha. The following unuhilo. She talks about the unuhilala. So you can check out this space and learn more. It goes on for several more pages. I just want to touch on some of the main things within this resource. The Kukulu Kumohana framework has 6 dimensions. It was built by many different Native Hawaiian organizations. It's a framework that someone can look at for personal practice if they're someone who uses substances, or someone, an Ohana member or a community that wants to make safe spaces for those who use substances. It's how someone can connect to these dimensions of well-being, whether they use substances or not, right? So it's about strengthening their connection to their culture, their understanding of what it means to be healthy, and that may or may not include substances, right? That's not for us to judge. We have our cultural practices sections, which this one is about hula. It has many quotes from different kumu hula or teachers of hula that practice many different lineages. It also shows the physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional aspects that hula can address for folks who use substances. We have a lot of quotes in here from folks who are in recovery, folks who are connecting to hula while in incarceration. This is our Oli section. So Oli is about vibration, or it's chanting. So it's about vibration. And when we think about vibration, it can have a calming impact on it, right? Like a somatic impact. So in this section, we learn how to create an altar space called the ku'ahu. We learn about how to take the energies or the characteristics that we want to bring into our space or into our lives. We put them on our altar space, on our ku'ahu, through plant people, plants that embody this symbolic characteristic that we want to bring in. We have oli in here that were specially written for us to be able to use to awaken the inner deity, awaken that inner fire, to really set your intention in the morning, right? These are all aspects of cultural practice that you can connect to, whether you use substances or not. Our va'a section looks at the va'a, that's a canoe, as a vehicle of recovery. So we ask folks, there's six seats in a canoe. And so we ask folks to think about, okay, if this is your vehicle of recovery, who do you want to be in your canoe with you? Who is your steersman? Who is your navigator? Who are your power seats? Who is, making you charge along that pathway? Who is it in your canoe that can help you on your own healing journey? And so we go through kind of some worksheets, and a lot of these sections have different worksheets that folks can kind of download and utilize in ways that make sense to them with the populations that whoever they're serving. So I want there's also a section on drug awareness, person first language, Indigenous peer support. Please feel free to download this for yourself. You can print it. It's completely open for folks to utilize. We want this in hands of folks. You can request a training as well. We have a train the trainer on this. I want to also say that this resource as it is is about Native Hawaiian culture. And I want to be specific about that because I want to give it over to my co-presenters who are going to share what this could look like if we look at this for other cultures. And one of my pet peeves is when folks are like Pacific Islanders, right? And we're trying to take one resource and apply it to all Pacific Islanders. We're not all the same, right? We are not all the same. All of our cultures have diverse, incredible diversity, beautiful strengths, rich stories, just incredible things, right? That have kept us safe and healthy since the beginning of time. And so I want to be able to make this. We want to be able to make a resource like this for each culture that wants it. And so we're asking you folks, if you're interested, please reach out. And I'm going to go ahead and skip my next slide and pass it to Carol Ann.
Mahalo Lilinoi. Iyang o kasalelia, moa, I humbly give my acknowledgements. I acknowledge the creator and their creations. I acknowledge the lands that technological advancements allow me to exist in simultaneously in this moment. My auntie island, Guahan, and my Hanai grandmother, Hawaiʻi. I acknowledge the people of these lands, their leaders, traditional, political, and religious. I acknowledge my presence as an offering from my motherland, Dompe. As a mere offering, I am grateful for everyone's time. I am Carol Ann Carl, the research coordinator of the Mapuna Lab in the Institute of Research and Engaged Scholarship at the University of Hawaii at West Oahu. I'll be sharing about cultural reclamation as harm reduction, showing the application of the E Hui Anana Moku framework through our Hawaii Community Compacted-Free Association, migrant-focused Oceans of Reflection Community Mural Project. Named by our lead artist and her siblings, the Oceans of Reflection Traveling Mural, which has not been completed yet, is to be an educational harm reduction tool, combining social determinants of health, cultural reclamation, and art. Contracted by the Alcohol and Drug Division of the Hawaii State Department of Health, once finished, the mural, which as you can see in this smaller picture is painted on transportable canvas, will travel to schools, community health centers, and other spaces to teach and start critical dialogues about Hawaii's Micronesian community. The images depicted on the canvas thus far show the abundance of Micronesia, a collection of ancestral stories reflective of all of our Pacific Islands, that we are more alike than different. Before we get into cultural reclamation, let me provide some context. The cultural reclamation lens I'm looking through is that of my culture, Pohnpeian. So here are a few things to keep in mind as I share about Oceans of Reflection. In Pohnpeian, as I have learned, 1, our knowledge is our life force, which is why we give it away so sparingly. Like a cup filled with water, each person is a vessel holding knowledge. When we're young, our cup is being filled. As we grow older, we are pouring our knowledge to transfer energy, create legacy. Once empty, hollow, this vessel is given back to the land because mass and energy are neither created nor destroyed. 2, navigation is a mindset and a skill set. Pohnpeians, the majority, stopped long distance navigating long ago. We created Pohnpei, a highly abundant island 7 degrees above the equator, where at its highest elevation can receive 300 inches of rain a year. High abundance of water, highly fertile soil, marsh and flourishing reefs, an island surrounded by a fringing reef creating a calm lagoon, no shore breaks, exponentially lower probabilities and occurrences of soil erosion or saltwater intrusion compared to that of the low-lying atolls. The factors that affect social determinants of health which necessitate navigation are largely absent in Pohnpei. Navigation is a mindset. We remember our ancestors, the treacherous oceans they traversed, that navigators are migrants, and as descendants of migrants who follow the stars as they come and go, we must honor them as a reflection of us and our history. How? 3, our oral history guides us. Just as the Bible with its fables, proverbs, and hymns teach core values and principles, we have our oral histories filled with tales of character-building odysseys, proverbs, and chants. A proverb reminds us that Pohnpei sa Karati Karata. Pohnpei is the island where people land on and sail off. It is the land where water precipitates and evaporates. Just as the traveling rains, when Pohnpeians leave Pohnpei, we become an offering to the world. The best things we can offer of Pohnpei are our knowledge, our mindset, and our stories. Pilachik makinauta pinlap. Little streams fill big rivers. Another proverb, which in the interpretation I'm sharing, teaches the importance of reciprocal knowledge exchange between youth who are small streams and elders who are big rivers. Leaning into water as knowledge, its cyclical life cycle, evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. When these streams and these rivers exist in healthy connection to one another, feeding each other's waters, we create a conducive and abundant watershed. We convene youth and elders, community leaders and artists, multiple generations with a plethora of knowledge sets to identify and weave together stories for the mural. This intergenerational exchange now becomes the generation of legacy and succession as knowledge is passed on. As the navigator follows the shine of stars, we follow the light of ancestors now living or long gone. Stories and stars are guides. Convening in these spaces, the elders and youth shine the brightest parts of their lights, their stories on each other, to help them come out of those dark places that urge substance misuse and agitate chronic illness. So let's look at some of our pinlap and a few of the big bodies of knowledge that we brought into this space. Amongst our elders were 2 cultural practitioners, Native Hawaiian, Ku'ulei Pereira Kiavekane, known widely for her inspiring Native Hawaiian reggae music. Ku'ulei graciously shared her knowledge and aloha with us, guiding us in protocol and teaching us how to be active Hawaiʻi people. Ku'ulei would also speak of the ways different aspects of Polynesian and Micronesian culture mirrored each other, how she could see herself in us. Chuki's Nuku'oran, Paul Tamana Poli Otoko, Tamana, which means Papa in Nuku'oran, acted as the bridge between Micronesia and Polynesia so needed for this work. As a Nuku'oran from a Polynesian outlier of the state of Pohnpei, he talked about the similarities in his language with Olelo Hawaiʻi, his cultural practices and Hawaiʻis. As a Chuki's Menwachlok man, he shared the traditional stories that raised him into a relentless academic advocate and activist for Native American and Indigenous rights. We also have our advisory board. Kumu Meliana Meyer, award-winning Native Hawaiian artist whose own collaborative mural project, Ku Aina Aloha, Beloved Land, Beloved Country, has traveled as far as the United Arab Emirates, used to spark discussions around building healthier, safer communities for Indigenous peoples. Oceans of Reflection was modeled after Ku Aina Aloha, with Kumu Meliana as our teacher. And Mama Inocenta Sound Kiku, multi-published, award-winning community leader for the Micronesian community. Mama Ino pushes us to see the big picture, to understand the intricate struggles the Micronesian community faces and guides us in the strategic toppling of barriers that arise. Micronesian excellence, excellence, excellence. We brought together 3 community celebrated artists. Lisette Yamase, whose brilliant charcoal art is readily recognized across the region. Kalani Omenkar, an award-winning graphic designer who owns a thriving digital design firm that's created for Jeep, National Geographic, and this year's January cover of the Honolulu magazine, just to name a few. Omenkar and Yamase were recently in one of Hawaii's first Micronesian art exhibitions in the summer. Our third artist is David Siegel, a young, highly skilled muralist who has done work across the Pacific region, including a United Nations initiative in New Caledonia and with Powwow, Hawaii. Now let's look at our Blechuk, our small bodies of knowledge. We work with 2 youth programs of different ages. The first is Pacific Voices, created by Mama Ino as a space where mothers who feared their children would grow up not knowing where they came from could teach their kids about the sacred pillars of identity. Tirolang, honoring of the maker and ancestors. Tiropun, honoring of the land that nurtures us and feeds us. Tirosat, honoring the ocean that connects us to our loved ones near and far. And Tiro Aramas, honoring of each and every one of us, including all living things. The after-school program engages youth ages 6 to 13 in cultural immersion activities, learning traditional chants, dances, and stories. The second is the Madao Project, a pilot cultural education program co-founded by Dr. Nicole Yamase, Desiree Yamase, and myself. The Madao Project aims to reconnect Micronesian high school students in Hawaii with their navigational heritage. In so doing, our major outcome is that our participants become confident Indigenous change makers who are critically conscious of their past and present to transform their social context for a better future, as responsible offerings to Hawaii in their identity as migrants, and as responsible keiki o kaʻina, as first-generation Micronesians born in Hawaii. And now, with the help of our producer, Sarah, I'd like to show a short video from the program showcasing the Madao leaders working on the mural.
Sherry County Likiat. My name is Sherry County Likiat. I am 18, a senior at Kaimaki High School, and I am from the island of the Sleeping Lady, Koshai.
My name is Tristan Henry. I'm 17 years old. I was born and raised on Bope, and I'm a senior at Kaimaki High School.
My name is Marvin Mariano. I go to Kaimaki High School. I'm a senior, and I'm from the beautiful islands of Pohnpei and Chile.
I've learned much more about myself, who I am as a Micronesian, and the potential I have, and who my ancestors were. All of these activities helped me understand how important it was for my ancestors to be deeply rooted in their culture.
Showed me the little things that I did not know. Before I came here, I did not know who Papa Mao was. I did not know who, that Micronesia has a good culture that we can depend on. Other than over here, other people are fighting to get their culture back. And the Madao Project has helped me to realize that my culture is still strong and I can still hold that. And if I can still hold my cultures, then I can share to the other people who are coming after me.
In many ways that the Madao Project helped me reconnect with my navigational heritage was, bringing me into the hokulea, my first time being on a canoe, a big canoe for the first time in a long time. It just brings back memories. meeting a lot of new people that knows about navigation and their willingness to share their knowledge with me.
Thank you. That concludes my portion of this presentation. If you have any questions or would like to connect, I can be contacted via email at carlcaro@hawaii.edu. I'll also add my contact info in the chat for access. Mahalo, Saina Ma'asi, Sizus Ma'asi, and Kalangan. I will now pass it over to Aubrey Herrera.
All right, Kalangan, Carlin, that was beautiful. Buenas tan hafade todos hamzu, Guahusi Aubrey Anger Mariano, Tamoruzut, Tata Guahans, and Pagu, Sumatagazut Giza Oahu Hawaiʻi. Hafade, aloha, and kasalele, everybody. My name is Aubrey. I'm Chamorro, born and raised on the island of Guahan. My Chamorro clan names are Detsa and Liberatu, and I now reside on Kanakauiwi land in Makiki on Oahu in the Pai'aina of Hawaii. I am a recent graduate of the University of Hawaii at Manoa with my undergrad degrees in psychology and American studies, and I just started my MPH in Native Hawaiian and Indigenous health. I'm also a graduate research assistant for Hawaii's Caring Systems Initiative for Youth Suicide Prevention. And I'm also an admin assistant at Lōkahi, where I met Lilinoe. I share these particular photos so that you can get a little glimpse of who I am and where I come from, because at the core of everything I do and can hope to do, I am a daughter of Guahan first. And I do want to preface before I get into my presentation that as a daughter of Guahan, my perspective is going to be different from folks from the other Marianas, just as our communities across the Pacific are very diverse. Chamorros across the Marianas are also very diverse, and we come from different contexts. And so this is not a one size fits all, but the beginning of a conversation. And I look forward to continuing this conversation with other Chamorros and Islanders in the future. Illinois. Do I have access? There we go. All right, just some brief context. When Illinois first asked me how we might be able to adapt this toolkit to Chamorros, the part of the toolkit that first resonated with me was its orientation to Hoʻiʻika people, to return to the source. And without context, one might wonder, why must Chamorros return to our source? Where are we now and where have we gone? I won't go too much into the issues that plague our communities. Lieutenant Governor Josh talked about those this morning, and we all know why we're here. But like our Kanakauiwi Maniatlu in Hawaii, I just want to explain that I believe this is a symptom of a deeper trauma within the Chamorro community. We have experienced ongoing historical and continued colonial trauma at the hands of several groups, including the Spanish Catholics, the US military, and during World War II occupations by both the Japanese and the Germans, depending on where you were in the Marianas. However, just like our Maniatlu, our siblings across the Pacific, we also have a very strong and rich culture that I believe we can reclaim and reconnect to in order to enhance these protective factors against substance misuse. And these are just a few protective factors I pulled from SAMHSA's most recent strategic plan. In the interest of time, I won't go over all of them, but the ones I have italicized are the ones that I think I will touch on most today with the practices I share. So turning to our ancestral knowledge as a source of strength. For us, for Chamorros, I think that where that needs to start is by reclaiming our oral histories. With the introduction of the Spanish Catholic and the US Western worldviews, our oral histories have been relegated to no more than myth or legend. I grew up referring to these oral histories as legend. And so I think we need to start with reclaiming these and understanding that just because these aren't written down in the way that the Western world may prefer, does not mean that they're of lesser value. At the very source of everything that exists for Chamorros is, of course, our origin story, and that is the story of Fu'una and Punten. The very brief, probably less poetic version of this is that Fu'una and Punten were a sibling duo who Chamorros believed were very powerful beings and existed long ago in a realm of darkness. And when Punten began to feel tired as if his time was coming soon, they devised a plan to make good of their powers before they left this earth. And so Punten convinced Fu'una reluctantly to use the parts of his body to thank you, Sarah, to use the parts of his body to create what we now know as the land, the sea, and the skies. And after that was done, Fu'una brought life and abundance to this earth before throwing her body into the earth at Fuha Rock, which is now known as our creation point. This is a picture of Fuha Rock, which is located in the village of Humatak on the south side of Pohan. And it is from this rock that the first humans were believed to have emerged. And on the very right is a digital depiction of Fu'una as Fuha by one of my favorite Chamorro artists, Lōkahi. So what does this origin story tell us? I think it tells us the importance of familial ties in Chamorro culture. Everything that has come to being came to be through a sibling bond. I think it tells us that this earth is the literal body of our ancestor Puntan, and that we were born from this land from the very body of Fu'una at Fuha Rock. Apologies, my slides are lagging. There we go. Expanding a little bit more. Sorry, let me try and go back. There we go. Sorry about that. Expanding a little bit more into our Chamorro worldview, ancient Chamorros did not believe in concepts of heaven or hell. We believe that our ancestors exist in the same realm as us, and once they transition into the spirit form, we know them as Tautamona, which means the first people or the people of before. We understand these to be our ancestors and our protectors, and we have always known them to be capable of harm, but not necessarily evil in the way that Spanish Catholicism might suggest. And so Chamorros know we just come with respect, especially when we're entering spaces such as Gihalam Tano, the deep jungle where Tautamona are believed to especially reside. And so what does this glimpse into our worldview also tell us? I think it reinforces the importance of familial connections in Chamorro culture and maintaining these connections even into the afterlife. I think it tells us that we have protectors to call on and that we must be respectful of sacred spaces. And this part of our worldview, again, reinforces land as sacred in our culture. So with this worldview and this origin story in mind, the particular practices that I selected to talk to you about today are ones that allow us to reconnect with our ancestors through land and through water. So the first of these is ancestral worship. This is something Chamorros have been doing for time immemorial, both through spiritual ancestors and through our land as our ancestor. I think that this can be employed in just everyday mindful connection, calling on our ancestors for guidance and for strength, and expressing gratitude for the ways that they carry us through our lives. Understanding that today many Chamorros are practicing Catholics, including my family. I was raised in the Catholic Church. I do not believe that this needs to be an either or situation. I think the more divine powers we have on our side, the better. And so just remembering to call on our ancestors when we feel we need guidance and strength. On a seasonal basis, we also had a practice at the first day of the Lunar New Year called the Lūkafuha. And this was something practiced by Chamorros from all of the Marianas who took a trek to our creation point to Fuha Rock and gave offerings to Fu'una, as well as bringing their fishing implements for blessings, for good fortune. And this practice has been revitalized today through independent Ohana local organization. There's a picture on the lower left of Lūkafuha in action. I believe this practice touches on our spiritual, mental, and emotional health. And if you engage in something like Lūkafuha, could even touch on our physical health. With regard to practices that allow us to physically connect with our ancestor Puntan through land and sea, Tanos and Tosi, it could be as simple as home gardening. I am a self-taught home gardener. But if you feel that you do not have a green thumb, Farm to Table Guam offers a farmer training program and home harvest systems that could get you started with building your knowledge in this area. If you don't have the time, the space, or the capacity otherwise to have a home garden, then there are other places where you can do this. When I visit home, I try my best to volunteer with the University of Guam Triton Farm. They are very welcome to volunteers and other folks who wish to learn from them. And this is a way that you can engage in this practice without necessarily having a home garden. We also, of course, have our Zo'amti, our traditional healers who practice Amut or plant medicine. Of course, as Caroline has mentioned, we want to be careful of how we share our knowledge. So not everybody gets access to this particular kind of knowledge. But if you do need help from a Zo'amti, there are places where you can seek that out, such as the Sagan Kulturan Samoro Center in Tumon on Bohan. And now the University of Guam actually just started a certificate program in traditional healing. So I'm not sure what the selection process is for that, but exciting advancements for our community. And I also want to say that this particular kind of practice doesn't require supplies or anything long and drawn out. Those who don't have the physical ability can just spend time in nature. Swim if you can, fish if you want to learn how to fish, or just sit in nature the way that you would sit with your grandparents, because our oral histories tell us that this land is our grandparent. This particular practice, I believe, touches on our physical health, of course, especially if you're consuming the foods that you're gardening. Our spiritual health through connecting to Punten, and then mental and emotional health are undoubtedly bolstered by these practices. And finally, a couple more practices I'd like to share. If we're talking about a strengths-based approach, Chamorros were praised in Spanish accounts for our advanced technology and the agility with which we navigated these waters. And so I think seafaring and paddling are great practices to tap back into. A more modern and accessible way to do this might be through the Marianas Paddle Sport Racing Association. They do outrigger canoe, a more modern style. There are also folks who do traditional seafaring, such as Tasa Inc. on Guahan, and in the CNMI, I know they have 500 sails. This is a physical activity, of course, but because it is a team sport, I believe that this could help support mental and emotional health by enhancing our community and social supports. And spiritual, of course, because we are revitalizing a traditional practice and we're connecting to our ancestry through the elements. And finally, this portion is a little less developed in our communities, but I'm excited to talk about it because it's one of my favorite things to do, is pottery. Ancient Chamorros had a robust pottery practice, and pottery is not something I got to engage with until I moved to Hawaii because we didn't have a public studio at the time. And everybody has told me since I started, man, I would love to engage in pottery. That looks so therapeutic. And I'm here to tell you that it is in a couple of ways. So first, if we want to talk about Western practices, the creation of art, including working with clay, has been associated with statistically significant reductions in cortisol levels. It's art therapy, right? And so it brings your stress level down if we want to talk about a Western kind of therapeutic model. From my personal experience, this picture on the upper right is from when I was first learning how to create pottery. And it was around the same time that I was coming out of about 1.5 years of again, lived experience with severe depression and anxiety after first moving to Hawaii. And it was through working with pottery that partly that was able to pull me out of this. And I think that's because from the opening that bag of clay to the final product in the ceramics process, there are so many points where something will go completely wrong. And so there is a radical acceptance that is required and a surrender that is required to create pottery that I think is transferable to a lot of other areas in our lives. You're not concerned with the outcome, or you shouldn't be, or you're going to end up very frustrated. It's about the practice of making, and pottery communities know that you put it in the kiln and you leave it up to the kiln gods. Whatever was meant to happen was meant to happen. If we're trying to adapt that to a cultural framework, we leave it up to our ancestors. So in terms of access to this practice, there's a new potter studio in Tumon on the island of Guahan. They do group classes. So this is something you could do with family and friends. And if you want to take it to the next level, the University of Guam and Northern Marianas College both offer pottery or ceramics classes. And just dream with me here. If we could learn how to process, harvest, and work with our local clay, the land and the water that is our ancestor, I mean, talk about connection. It's an embodied cultural practice that is, I mean, I want to get as close as I can to the traditional version of this practice. And so I'm trying to inspire as many people as I can to go with me on that journey, because I can just nerd out about it for days. So in closing, I already touched on how this bolsters mental and emotional health. This can be a physically involved practice, as physically as you'd like it to be, and as spiritual as you would like it to be. So in closing, here we go. I would just like to share a not formal at all quote that my kumu Sam Kealona Scott always shares before class. Academic research is just putting on paper what our ancestors already knew. So yes, we have these great Western tools and we go and we get our education and we learn these Western models. But if we look backward, if we tap into our ancestral knowledge, we see that our communities already have everything that we need to carry ourselves forward. So unless Lilinoy and Caroline have anything to add, Saina Ma'asi, mahalo, and kalangan for listening.
Mahalo. I was just taking a picture of that quote because wow, that was fire. Amazing.
Kingston also works with us at Papa Lōkahi.
Yeah, she's fire. So go look up her stuff that she has also published. Does anyone have any questions for us? I think we put Aubrey, if you want to share your contact or any kind of contact information in the chat. You can also get to Aubrey through me if you would like to talk with her. Don't leave that quote on. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions. It should be immediate to get the toolkit. Right after you sent it, it automatically sends you a link for download. The form is just for us to keep track, because again, you know, it sometimes it's scary when you put cultural knowledge out there, but again, like the resources, it's not all the secrets, but it is a pathway. And like my co-presenter shared within that toolkit, you can scan the QR codes, or if you have the digital copy, you can click the hyperlinks to get connected to additional learning resources and things like that. If you did not get it, maybe check your spam, or you can email me and I'll send you a link too. You sure, you guys? No questions? Really? Okay. Well, mahalo for being an awesome audience. And mahalo to my co-presenters. That was phenomenal. And I hope my co-presenters are cool with it actually. I hope to be able to take everything that we've put together for this and really start to map out what these templates could look like, or what this could look like for different cultures. So again, I'm putting the kahea or the call out. If anyone wants to be a part of this project, to bring your culture and, you know, provide that cultural lens for your people, you know, please do. We would love to bring in more cultures into the conversation. Okay, that. Mahalo nui.